will you all commit to attempting to be present for commissioner meetings as often as humanly possible?
Is this question when we get elected or just right now?
If you're elected, will you make your best efforts to be at all of the commissioner meetings in some way, shape, or form, be it personally, Zoom, phone call, whatever, so that meetings that are on the docket for months aren't withheld because somebody just happened to be out of town?
Well, you can actually take a look at my record for the past 60 months. I have probably missed only six meetings, and I'm not even like official. It would show that my commitment to the citizens of the Blanchard County. And yes, I would make every possible attempt to be there.
110%. So you guys are elected again, and I don't want to sound like I'm talking in circles, but you're electing representatives. In my opinion, I would take that very seriously, even if I'm on vacation, which I hope to go on every now and then. But when I do go on vacation, I would definitely want to still accept my responsibility as your elected representative to sit there and at least zoom in so that there is a quorum. There's no reason because I choose to go on vacation that county business needs to shut down.
In 15 months, I've missed 2 meetings.
Yes, I think it's a critical piece, and while I've never been an elected official, you can look at my record as a volunteer within our county in those different roles, and my dedication and commitment to completing those tasks by being fully engaged and involved.
So I hear a lot of talk about zoning and money and all those kind of things. In the last several years, I have watched as a lot of the meetings we've attended or watched on Zoom are regarding people who have come in, bought zoned rural land, then want to change it for wedding venues, which they operate illegally, for gas stations, for storage units, for all kinds of things. So the people come in, the people voice their opinion, and they say, no, we don't want this. Wouldn't it be much more practical if those things didn't even have to be an issue? We didn't have to fight the zoning all the time, which in turn leads to what we've been observing on the committees and all that. Ending up in courts, which costs even more money. Rather than that, shouldn't we listen to the people and listen to the zoning laws that they themselves wrote?
You guys all decide.
It's a great question, and I'll admit it's not an easy answer. So there's a couple of aspects or facets to answering that question, in my opinion. First and foremost, we have to understand and respect private property rights. And when I say that, I believe that very often there are unbalanced opinions when it comes to respecting private property rights. So some people say it's the right of the applicant to do what they want. Other people say, well, it's the right of the neighbors to say yes or no. And I don't think either one of those is the appropriate approach. And so we have to have clear and concise zoning that is written in a way and with a map overlay that's consistent. One of the problems we have right now, and it's being worked on, is that the original zoning map that was created was not always consistent. And so sometimes there are parcels that have a color zone designation on the map, and then the legal description of meeting that criteria for that zone does not follow the color overlay of the map. And so those things have to be cleaned up and corrected. So that's one type of zone change that I think is appropriate. The kind that I believe are inappropriate, I think you may have spoken to more directly, is I don't believe it's right for me to come in, buy a parcel of land in, say, the middle of Ag and Forest 20 zoning, and then tell my neighbors that you're going to all have to live with the fact that I want to change it to rural 5 and build a bunch of houses there in the middle of the farm field. I consider existing zoning that's done correctly to be essentially a social contract with your neighbors. You've all agreed that that's the type of community you want to live in. That's why you purchased that land. That's why you choose to live there. And so then to turn around and try to come up with a reason should be used completely differently is going to cause harm to your neighbors, and therefore, that one person will be violating the private property rights of their neighbors by causing them harm. So that's why I think it's really important that we take a closer look at what our land use regulations are going to be and do a better job with our comprehensive plan so that we're being real clear and concise about those types of issues. I believe another thing that happens a lot is when you see applications go in for a zone change to a parcel of land, they like to point to some nearby parcel that is not consistent with the character of the zoning in the area and use that as the excuse. I won't say reason, it's the excuse they're using to try to change the zoning on their parcel. And again, that's not consistent with the character of the area, and it's not consistent with what we have for the broader zoning in that area. So that's why we need to really go in there and tighten all of that up, because not only do we need to protect one another as neighbors from doing harm to each other, but we also need to make it fair and reasonable so that when somebody buys a property, they know that the way it's zoned is accurate. And they don't have to go through these, legal gymnastics to try to figure it all out, because that's not fair either. So the county needs to do a better job, and then I believe that we as neighbors to one another need to be respectful and responsible. And when somebody makes an inappropriate request, something that would be unlawful, it should be denied, and that should be clear.
Believe it or not, Asia and I occasionally agree, and usually it's on land use files. 2 examples. In a 2-1 vote, we turned down the gas station that was proposed out in, I believe it was that way. Then, Hoodoo Valley, thank you. Spirit Valley, Hoodoo Valley. Recently, we had a variance that came forward, and I have to be careful because if we talk too much about anything, then we're going to have to pull ourselves out. Recently, there was a variance where we were asked for a 2.5 acre minimum lot to be allowed to further subdivide that into 2 lots. One of them would have been 1 acre. One of them would have been approximately half an acre. 1 acre plus half an acre is 1.5 acres when the minimum lot size is 2.5 acres. 1.5 acres is not 2.5 acres. However, there's some additional complexity to that. That lot was platted in 1912. That lot is older than any zoning ordinance in any of Bonner County. It is older than any zoning in the state of Idaho. There is a multitude of non-conforming zoning across every single county in this state. Unless you're in Idaho County, where there is only 1 zone, and I am not in support of that because that's insanity. And they are struggling now with that. Now here's some numbers, and here's some things to think about. Every one of us came from somewhere. Whether you were born right here in Bonner County, whether you are a transplant from Washington, Colorado, or where the largest number of new Bonner County residents come from, and Idaho residents, which is the state of California. In the total land divisions, in 2020 there were 119, in 2021 there were 230, in 2022 there were 149, last year there was 81, showing there has been a drop in land divisions. Total quasi-judicial files. This is the things that we have to sit there and we can't make comments on, such as the wedding venue that is coming up next Thursday, and I'm very curious to see how that hearing will go. In 2020, there was 82 quasi-judicial files, 21, 132, 22, 89, and 23, 91. Total administrative land use files, 137 in 2020, in 2021, 236, in 2022, 311, and in 2023, 240. So far this year, there's 69. There are some challenges with zoning and property rights because you have the rural character of the neighborhood, which is really when we're talking, largely you're talking about the rights of neighbors to enjoy the quality of life. You also have the private property rights of the landowner. And that's where there's grind. and it's not easy. The number of times that we get asked to settle these disputes continues to be elevated. And I'll give you an example in regards to farmland. The average age of the American farmer is 59 years old. The average age of a Bonner County or an Idaho farmer is 57 years old. Many of these families who have histories of farming are finding that their youth may not want to farm. And if you look at the number of working farms in Bonner County, of which my family has one, there are not that many working farms in Bonner County. So what happens many times is that farmers are looking, how am I going to retire? And what they do is they sell a working farm to someone else, and that person decides, I'm going to split it or do whatever it is that they choose with that property. And it is upsetting. And that is their right. These are challenging times, and people have a right to develop their property, and people also have a right to fight for their rural character. And that's why getting to be on the board of the county commissioners can sometimes be pretty engaging. And in regards to the wedding venue, we're going to listen to that on Thursday, and I hope that it is as civil as the Sago Bike Park was, of which we have yet to hear a decision from the hearing examiner, who waded through 600 comments and 3 hours of testimony. People have a right to do what they want on their land within reason, and neighbors also have a right to want to protect their quality of life, and that's why you elect us. And I am committed to following the rules as they are written. And I agree with Mr. Donkey that if we don't like the rules, we change them.
Who asked that question? Could you just briefly ask that again, please? What were you asking?
We heard a lot of money about zoning, or a lot of talk about zoning, money and all this. I should have probably rephrased it to, people buy these properties in designated rural areas and then want to use it for commercial use. To me, that's starting a war with your neighbors.
Okay.
So it was how do you address that?
Okay, so we have an issue going on right now, the Sago Bike Park. I don't know if that's what you're referring to or not. I think there needs to be, at the county level, there needs to be some guidelines in there, very strict guidelines as far as changing your zone, especially rural zones, nonetheless, into a commercial zone. Commercial zones, we always kind of look at that being closer to the cities, closer to where the infrastructure is and all that. And I was listening to that going on last Thursday, I believe it was, Wednesday or Thursday. My days, I don't even know what day it is anymore. Where the guy that was putting on a presentation for the bike park was saying that, look at all the different ways that property could be used. We should be happy that it's only being used as a bike park, right? And so I'm like, interesting. So one of the things that he said that I recalled was the fact that that property owner, it's zoned rural 10 is what he said. I haven't confirmed that or not. I find that hard to believe. There are guidelines, and the guidelines specifically say how the zoning goes, depending on the slope of the land, how many trees are on it, the soil type. There's a lot of different qualifications in order to put that zone number onto that parcel. I went out there and I looked at that, and the presentation didn't do any justice, in my opinion. It's a mountain. It's a regular mountain, and I guess we don't use topo maps or something when we're putting on these presentations, but if it was shown on a topo map, you can see the grid lines are very close to each other and it's very steep, which I understand might be great for mountain biking, but I don't see any way, according to our local zoning regulations, how that mountain could be zoned a rural 10. One of the reasons is that the septic systems need more property. They need more real estate in order to work properly, so that sewer does not go down onto the person below them. And you can't sell me on the fact that that steep mountain there is going to be able to do that on a 10-acre zone. So I'm against it personally, that you buy a piece of property and want to change it. On the other hand, we had a situation closer to where I live, and it was a big ranch, and it was hundreds of acres, and they purchased that zone rural 10 also. And the county came in and rezoned years ago, and they didn't notify homeowners and property owners, and they rezoned that property into a rural 20, so they stepped it up from a 10 to a 20. And for whatever reason, the property owner, I don't know why, never got to talk to him personally, wanted to zone it back down to 10s, is where he bought it. And it's like, well, that's kind of understandable, but what I would like to see is that the government, our county government, needs to address the property owners when they're doing a zone change. I would like to know if my property is going to be rezoned, and then that would give me the opportunity to go down there and protest it if I wanted to, depending on if it fits the guidelines or not. So I believe that property did get rezoned, if you will. It got zoned back to an R10. But what we all have to understand too is that rezoning doesn't necessarily give the green light to subdividing. Along with subdividing comes many more rules and regulations for someone to be able to do that, and infrastructures, and it may or may not be turned down. But I guess that was a long answer to your short question there. Sorry about that.
I forgot to mention too that because of the county craziness going on, it all ends up in the courts, which costs even more money. And we keep hearing about money and taxes,
Right.
but yet irresponsibility, I think, is leading to more costs.
One thing that I expect from my board of commissioners, which are my representatives, are to work in the best interest of the public. That's a fine line. It is hard to balance because are they working in your best interest or his best interest? That's where it's really hard to come down to. That's why we have guidelines and it's specified. And one thing that it looks like is happening is that you may be held accountable to those guidelines, but this corporation over here is not held accountable to those guidelines. So I'm not making any accusations, all right? But it does look that way to the public. And if we would be more transparent as your electeds and explain why I'm voting this way or why I'm voting against it, I think it would take a lot of that distrust and that transparency issue out of the equation. Thank you.
There's a lot of things being said. I would like to, I guess, address start with one thing. I have attended that bike path meeting with planning. What was happening there is not rezoning, but application for conditional use permit. The property rights are a pretty complex issue. The personal I see is you can do whatever you want with your property as long as there's no harm done to your neighbor. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Brian has said. Even the state statute said that county should grow from incorporated areas and not grow randomly in rural areas. And actually it says that the state and the county should be preserving ag and forest land. There's a lot of time and a lot of effort went into zoning Bonner County many years ago. And those zones were not just arbitrarily made by a board of commissioners. There were a lot of research done. Because they do don't quote me on it, I got numbers like 67 or 97 different soil types we have in Bonner County. I just do not remember the exact numbers. And I think it's very important what we can and cannot do with the property in different zones. And I'd also like to address the issue that the amount of MLDs has been reduced is because of loopholes have been closed, which means our system, our laws are still not perfect, and there's a room to grow. As a county commissioners, we should be looking towards what's in the best interest of all property owners, and be closing the loopholes that give some property owners or corporations a little special way in.
So before we go to our next question, these guys have some plans to go to Lincoln Day, so let's do 2 more questions from the public. Is that okay? because we've got to raffle it off. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, I'll shorten this one up because this was only for the three comments, because I already know our comments. Our last board started the reworking of the comprehensive plan. They also took the planning and zoning commission, which was a commission, and split it up into a planning commission and a zoning commission, and then they also appointed a hearing examiner, that's a one-person job, whose role basically is redundant to the zoning commission. And during the reworking of the comprehensive plan, they have cherry-picked certain things here and there. This is continuing on to this work with the current commission. Cherry-picked here and there from the sub-area plan, but largely ignored a lot of what happened in the sub-area plan, while saying that they're following them because they are picking little things here and there. And also, they appointed when Milton Overton finally was gone, finally from the planning department, they then appointed a planning director and a deputy director, both of whom have 0 planning credentials. And so we've got kind of a mess in the planning department and the planning and zoning commissions that really are not serving the people. So my question is to the non-incumbents, how would you address those issues going forward?
1 minute each person, you guys have someplace else to be, and then we'll go Steve.
Was that a short question?
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So first and foremost, I think we need to take a step back and do a big picture evaluation. We need to see when we have a new board, where the comprehensive plan is at. We need to do a thorough evaluation and understand, in comparison to those 5 sub-area plans and the recommendations that came out, do we see any gaping holes that need to be addressed? Then I believe we need to also consider if having a hearing examiner is in the best interest of the people, because as you indicated, we're dealing with one person's opinion instead of a board. Instead of having a group of people that are making these decisions, so there can be a little bit more of a back and forth deliberation to help reach a good conclusion. The fact that the planning and zoning was split from being one commission into 2, I would not want to make an immediate decision on that for a new board. I think it would be important, again, once we better understand how much additional work we think is necessary to improve and deal with issues that may still exist in the comprehensive plan. It might be important from an efficiency perspective to continue to keep them separate for a period of time to get through any corrections or additional work that are necessary. And so I want to be thoughtful about that evaluation before we make any decisions. I hope that answers your question.
So I do think it's important that we follow the guidelines that are in place, sub-area plans and such. One thing that has just briefly been discussed is that we as the people, if we don't like these plans, we can always change them. They were put into effect by previous boards. They can be changed by current boards. We all know that every time we get a new president, first thing they do is they come in and write 31,000 new executive orders, right? So there's nothing wrong with a new board coming in and looking at where they can change things or leave it the same. One thing that I would definitely entertain, though, which may curb quite a few problems, is possibly putting P&Z back together under one roof instead of 2 split ones. There's many things that I think that would help improve upon. So, my opinion, short answer. Thank you.
The state statute allows counties to have hearing examiner. It allows them to have separate planning and zoning commissions. Does it mean we have to have all of those? I don't think so. We don't need to be doubling up the work. But once again, we need to go back to the comprehensive plan and to sub-area plans and see how much of the people's will through sub-area plans were implemented or going to be implemented in our new comprehensive plan. And if there's more things to be done to implement people's will right in the plan, then we should do it. And if that requires 2 different boards, then it's okay for the time being. So we just have to play by ear and see where but I'm not opposed to have planning zoning under one roof to have them separately. It's strictly we need to see what we will find in the new comprehensive plan. However, I do not think that we need a hearing examiner who is doing exactly the same thing as the planning board.
So Steve, quick, short answer so that we can.
In 5 words or less. Weekly board meetings take place on Tuesday at 9 o'clock. I've seen some last as few as 30 minutes, sometimes that, maybe an hour. I think the longest one I've seen has been a couple hours.
Oh, no.
And there's been some longer, but not many. So let's say we average an hour at a board meeting. I believe there's something like 17 departments, and you manage a budget $75 million to the north. How many businesses do you see that run a $75 million business on 50 hours a year? Let's triple that. Let's go 3-hour meetings every week. How many $75 million businesses do you see run on 150 hours per year? It's the business of the people. Would you accept public comments on agendized items because it's the business of the people?
I think we answered that. I think that what you provided was statistics on the dollar amount of the organization versus the desire to shorten the meeting itself. Okay. So with that being said, thank you to the candidates for District 3 Commissioner. It's a 4-year. I know it's a little size, but as we leave, we're going to do the raffle real quick. People wrote their names down. But I'm going to give kind of a quick thing on my term. I'm District 2, which is our area. I'm the commissioner.